Hello, everyone. I'm here for one of my stories, and today I'm talking to Phil McGowan. Phil specializes in recording and mixing music for films, TV shows, and video games. He's worked with numerous prolific composers and is considered a go-to score mixer in the industry. He was recently nominated for 2 Emmy Awards in the score mixing category for the Netflix series Cobra Kai and the HBO series Tina. He has a huge page on IMDb, and some of the credits that got me really excited include Last Days in the Desert, The Gift, The Lodge, Promising Young Woman, Wild Indian, and of course, Cobra Kai. I'm a huge fan. So Phil, welcome to one of my stories.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Let us know how you got into music as a career.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been playing piano since I was in second grade. Both my parents are musicians. They weren't professional musicians, but my mom got her music education degree and taught piano when I was a kid. And when my sister started taking piano lessons, I got jealous and wanted to take piano lessons. So then that started in second grade, and always had music around the house. Always loved music. And then when I was, I think, 12 or 13, somewhere around there, I got interested in, my dad had some keyboards and synthesizers and like a little mixer. And I started messing around with that and read the whole manual for the mixer and kind of really got into audio stuff, and then helped a local guy. I'm from Central Maine, so nothing big, but like helped a local guy that did concerts around Central Maine, just kind of helping him out with live sound sorts of things, doing concerts and what have you. And then started to get into home recording around that same time throughout high school. Got really interested in audio production and music production, but at the same time, really always loved film and started to really love film music while I was growing up. And I was like a DVD bonus features junkie because, you know, when I was in high school, that was like mid 2000s. There wasn't really any YouTube. There was no, online series to learn how to mix or do audio or do film music or anything like that. So yeah, I would eat up any special edition DVD set and just, get those little 5 to 10 minute snippets into the industry of what people in sound and music do. And then I decided sophomore year of high school that I wanted to pursue it professionally or study it at least. And that's what led me to Berklee College of Music, which is where I ended up going to college. I was originally going to do a dual major with film scoring and music production because I thought maybe for a while I'd be a composer as well. And I kind of dabbled in writing music and things like that. But ended up just doing the music production degree, partially because I didn't want to be in school that long. Then also the great thing about a place like Berklee is like there's so much talent around you. You kind of learn what you're really best at. So I decided just to stick with the mixing and recording and music production stuff, which is really what my forte is. Finished that in 2009. I was actually touring with a band doing live sound during that time. Was thinking of going that direction, but that just didn't really go anywhere. So about a year after college in March 2010, I moved out to LA specifically to be a score mixer because it was a perfect combination of I love music production, I love film music specifically. So I was like, that sounds great. To be an engineer, recording and mixing film music sounds like a really cool job. So I came out here. I ended up getting lucky that I landed a job with a guy named Greg Townley, who's Rolf Kent's engineer. At the time, I knew him best from like Wedding Crashers and Sideways and movies like that Rolf had done. So I assisted him for a few months, did a couple films with Greg, and then I was kind of freelance assisting at the time, and eventually got double recommended to be Trevor Morris's tech, who's a composer that I worked with for about 4.5 years on staff. So started out as his like assistant tech, and then sort of slid over. He built a studio in Santa Monica that had a beautiful score mixing room that I kind of ran and did some work out of and things like that. So I started doing more engineering, mixing, editing, stuff like that for him. Then in 2015, I went freelance, and that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years, working with a bunch of different clients. Still do stuff for Trevor here and there, and it's been great. I can't believe it's been that long since I've gone freelance.
You said you play piano. Did you learn to play any other instruments along the way?
Yeah, actually, I ended up switching to saxophone in middle school so I could play in the concert band, and that ended up being my principal instrument through college.
I didn't realize that they had programs specifically for film composing in a music school. So what is that like? I mean, how is that program? Do people sit around and watch movies and then say like, let's put music to this, or how does that program work?
I think so. I mean, a lot of it, I think probably, I mean, I didn't end up doing that program. I did music
Mhm.
production, but I have a lot of friends that did film scoring. And then there's some graduate programs that friends of mine did, like at USC has one, UCLA has one, Columbia College in Chicago has a great film scoring master's program. But as far as I know, what people tell me, a lot of it overlaps with just a composition course because a lot of it is learning how to write for orchestras and a lot of kind of romantic period and 20th century music, which is a big part of a lot of film scores. But yeah, they also learn how to use Pro Tools and how to sequence and how to, how music fits the picture. I think they also study, storytelling, learning, how film production works and how writing for films works, and acting and just studying film scores, things like that. So I think it's kind of a varied combination of some technology, some composition, some studying film industry things, because that's really the combination of things that makes up a film composer these days. They really have to be well versed in the technology to do their own demos and write the music and things like that.
I can imagine one of the base assignments being set music to Metropolis.
Yeah, I think they actually sometimes do silent films like that because there's no other sound, so it's kind of the perfect opportunity to just write a bunch of music. But yeah, they definitely. I helped out some of my friends in college with their like student projects that were just rescoring clips and things like that.
What is score mixing? So far, I have mainly interviewed composers, so I'm really curious about what it is that you do.
Yeah, so it's really I'm sort of a recording engineer and mixer. Someone that's the person behind that giant console with all the knobs and things like that, setting up microphones and that sort of thing. The same thing you would see, for record production for albums and stuff. I just specialize in film, television, and video game music. And so therefore I'm part of the composers team. So composers are purely all my clients. I'm almost always hired directly by the composers, the same way that a musician would be, or an orchestrator, or somebody else that's going to help with the composer's score. So I would be in charge of if there's anything else to be recorded, like orchestra or drums or guitars or vocals that I'm going to be involved with, and I would be, running those sessions, deciding what microphones to use, where to place them, things like that, helping produce the session as well. And then the biggest part of my job these days is really the mixing, where after everything's recorded, I get all the recorded elements, some of it that I've recorded, some of it other people have recorded. Or these days, sometimes it's all stuff that was recorded overseas. And, Cobra Kai, for example, the orchestra was done in Eastern Europe. So that all just came to me over the internet. And obviously, I didn't record that. But I'm assembling all these elements, including then the composer will export what we call a synth master. So basically, it's an audio file for every instrument in their computer program, in their digital audio workstation. So every taiko drum and guitar and synth and all that kind of stuff, I get that all split out. And then I have to kind of combine it and make it all work as a cohesive cue with live orchestra and then with other live elements. Often, almost always these days, mixing in some sort of surround sound format. A lot of composers don't work in 5.1 or 7.1; they're just in stereo. So a big part of my job too is getting a good 5.1, 7.1, or now I'm starting to do things in Dolby Atmos as well. And then kind of refining it, making it work a little bit better to picture. But still, I always want to. I'm not going to reinvent the wheel because what they did in their computer is what the director and the producers would have approved. So even though we maybe have live orchestra now or other live elements, and that I'm also enhancing it and hopefully making it sound better, I don't want to stray too far from the direction they went in creatively, because that's how they were telling the story for the project. So it's kind of a fun challenge to ride that line, not going too far, but still doing my job to make it sound better and bigger and deeper and wider and all those things that engineers do for music. And then I deliver my mixes to another team of mixers, who we call re-recording mixers, and they do the final mix with the music, sound effects, and dialogue. So I'm kind of interfacing with them usually as well with what sort of deliverables I'll send to them and things like that.
So you're not having to worry about the part where you say, well, this music might be too loud for this person who's trying to talk right now. That's kind of the next step beyond you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always conscious of that, and I always get a rough dialogue and sound effects guide track, so I can hear what dialogue lines are and roughly what the sound effects are going to be. Though it's all rough. I mean, all the dialogue I get isn't cleaned up yet. A lot of it hasn't been overdubbed like ADR yet and things like that. And then the sound effects are just whatever the picture editor put in there rough. It's not like the sound designer's work. So I'm conscious of that, and sometimes I will help maybe make a cue a little bit clearer in the mid range so that it doesn't conflict with dialogue as much. But I wouldn't be the one who actually would decide what level the music's at. That would be the music and dialogue re-recording mixer who I deliver to, and then they're also beholden to the director or producers or showrunner or whoever's ultimately sitting behind them making all the big decisions at the dub stage.
You work with both, you work with video games, you do movies, you do TV shows. I'm curious how long it takes you to score mix a movie versus, like, I'm assuming you work, I'm kind of wondering with like TV shows, if you do like an episode at a time, or how, how long does it take you to do this for a movie versus an episode of a TV show?
Yeah, TV is definitely one episode at a time, or sometimes a group of episodes. Like Cobra Kai, we usually do 2 or 3 episode chunks at a time. And for TV, I typically do an episode in 1 or 2 days at most. And it all depends for anything how many minutes of music there is. That'll kind of determine how long it takes for me to get through it. And then also the number of pieces of music, which we call cues. If there's a lot of cues, like if there's a ton of 15-second cues with a ton of tracks in each cue, that'll take me longer than if there's like 1 3-minute cue with a bunch of tracks, because it every piece of music I have to build a new session in my computer and mix it and import stuff, and there's a kind of basic things I have to do. So it depends on a few of those factors, but generally when I book projects, I estimate around 15 to 20 minutes of music mixed in a day. So a lot of films would maybe have like a 60-minute score. I would want 3 to 4 days at least, depending on what it is. Sometimes it's super simple. So if it's just one recording of live orchestra, that's pretty consistent, so it wouldn't take me as long. But then if it's something like Cobra Kai, where we have the kitchen sink of elements on some of those cues thrown in there, I mean, there's rock drum kit and guitars and synths, and then all the stuff that Zach and Leo program, and then live orchestra, which has been overdubbed, and it's just some of those cues are just massive sessions, just tons of stuff, so that takes a little bit longer. But yeah, that's my general rule of thumb, is like 15 to 20 minutes per day.
Maybe it used to be a little bit longer, but now through experience, you're able to turn it around quicker.
Oh yeah, as you get more experience, you get faster in the software. Pro Tools is what I use as far as the audio software, and that helps a lot. And then just I always like to try to stay really organized, so I'm not looking for assets, or I'm not missing things that people sent me that have to be put in a certain piece of music. So that helps speed it along. But yeah, I try to overestimate. So because the opposite problem when you don't have enough time is harder to deal with. It's just sometimes it's a late night just to get everything done, or depending on how many notes I get from the composer as well. Some projects are a little more straightforward. Some of them take a little more sort of massaging from me and the composer. So
you mentioned that your point of contact is the composer. Do you get all your directions from them, or do you ever do interfacing with the director as well?
99% of the time, it's just the composer. Every now and then, a director might come by if they're interested, and they might have some thoughts. And obviously, the director's telling the composer what they want. So if they tell me what they want, it sort of bypasses them. Though it's always with the composer involved. I don't think I've ever had a situation where I'm doing any sort of like mixed notes with just the director. But yeah, definitely the composer is my main client. Every now and then, like a producer from another project, or sometimes music editors will refer me to a project, or be like, "Oh, hey, I worked with Phil on this, and we need a score mixer. Let me introduce you to the composer," and it works out that way. But most of the time, yeah, I'm basically essentially a subcontractor of the composer.
Let's talk about equipment. What do you use to do your score mixing?
I mean, essentially, it's just computers. It's all done, as we call it, in the box these days. I do have some control surfaces here that just control the software, so that faders where I can adjust levels, and knobs to control things that are on the computer. But it's all stuff that technically I could do with a mouse and keyboard. This just makes it easier for me to do that. But it's a complicated set of computers and a couple of little audio interfaces, and then a bunch of speakers, because I just updated my room upgraded to Dolby Atmos, so I have 13 speakers in here now, some in the ceiling, some kind of all around me, which is kind of the new format that everyone's crazy about. So yeah, it's pretty much just computers and speakers.
If somebody was interested in getting into score mixing, how would you recommend that they get started?
Probably just start playing around with software. You know, everyone that gets a Mac at least gets GarageBand, and there's other free DAWs, digital audio workstations out there that you know can do quite a lot. So you can really just start to learn engineering. I definitely say just start listening to every imaginable style of music, because one of the fun things about working in scores is that you know I've mixed scores that are all electronic. Some of them are purely orchestral, some of them are kind of more rock scores. I've mixed some like folksy country scores. I mean, I've you know kind of hit almost every genre over the years, throughout, depending on what the project is and what it needs. So it's good to be familiar with a ton of different styles, not just, you know, I mean, we all love John Williams or Jerry Goldsmith or the big, you know, grand orchestral scores, but that's these days not what it only is. So yeah, having familiarity with a lot of different types of music is good. And then, I mean, I went to a college and I loved it, and I had a good experience with Berkeley, and there's a lot of other schools that do audio production. So that's always an option. Some people just decide out of high school just to move to New York, Nashville, LA, wherever, and get a job at a studio and start learning that way. Because even with a degree, your first year or two in the industry, wherever you end up going, is kind of like grad school. You really, you know, you might have learned some of the basics and some, you know, things about recording and mixing and stuff like that. But then you really get refined a lot when you start working, you know, assisting other professionals and people like that. You get to really see how it's done in the quote unquote real world. So that's yeah, kind of the general path. But a lot of people, I mean, you know, I was even able in 2000, mid 2000s, to start doing some stuff at home, and especially these days, you know, there's so much learning you can do online.
You mentioned that you were able to be an assistant to somebody else first. Did you learn? I'm sure you learned a lot from that experience. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I lucked out. So, one of my, I worked at the studio office at Berkeley. So I worked alongside the guy who did all the booking for all the studios, and he used to be in LA for about 25 years at a studio called A&M, which is the legendary studio. It's now called Henson Recording. So he had tons of contacts, and with spring break of 2008, 2009, he organized a trip of students that wanted to come out here. We just had to pay our airfare, and then he organized all these studio tours. So we got to see a ton of really famous recording studios here in LA, and then we were here for a week, just kind of getting a vibe of the town and stuff like that. And I fell in love with LA as soon as I got here. I couldn't wait to move out here. Um, so he had an opening for me to work at a studio in Santa Monica as an intern or as a runner, which is how a lot of engineers start. You start out, you know, getting coffee, making coffee, getting lunches, you know, admin kind of front desk stuff, and then, you know, if you do good at that and can pay attention to details, they'll put you as a second assistant on sessions, on recording sessions or mixing sessions, and then you kind of move up the ranks if you keep doing well. And then eventually the hope is that someone picks you up, either an artist picks you up as their engineer, or like another engineer producer picks you up as their direct person. So that's kind of the traditional path that some people still take, kind of moving up through the recording studios as an intern or as a runner, is usually what we call them. But for me, yeah, I had emailed because I knew I wanted to specifically be a score mixer. That's what I wanted to start pursuing, because there's so many different fields in audio. There's so many different things you can do as an audio engineer. But I was like, no, I love film music. I want to try to do that. So I think I had an advantage in like looking back, that I narrowed it down to a niche, because it kind of, you know, gave me a smaller set of jobs and people to talk to. But yeah, so I emailed as many score mixers I could find. It was only like 5 that I could find emails online for. You know, everybody wasn't on Facebook back then and things like that, so it's a little bit harder to track people down. Yeah, and the one guy that really got back to me, Greg Townley, is the one who ended up, when I moved to LA, he's like, oh yeah, just let me know when you come here and we'll just like meet for coffee and I'll give you some advice or whatever. And it just ends up that I was like 5 days after I got to LA, I met, and then he was like, well, I have a bunch of work coming up. I need an assistant. Like, so he gave me a little test. He put me in front of one of his giant Pro Tools sessions and had me tell him what I see, like what the routing was, basically how everything is, you know, assigned and set up and stuff like that. And he was like, all right, well, you know enough, like, cool, you want a job? And I was like, yeah. And then I lucked out that I was kind of someone's direct assistant, kind of right off the bat, which was really fortunate.
You're mixing the music that the score composer did, but a lot of times in music, there's also licensed music from other artists that is brought in. You're, I'm assuming, also mixing that in to an extent, or
Not usually. Usually that stuff would go straight to the re-recording mixer who I'm delivering to. So a music supervisor would be the person that would be finding songs or any licensed music, and they'd be dealing with all the legal stuff, all the paperwork. the cue sheet for how to assign royalties and all that kind of stuff. And then music editor is the person that would actually take that piece of music and they would edit it to the picture. And then usually, I mean, depending on what they have, library music these days, if it's music that is score like music that's written specifically for a music library, oftentimes that'll have what we call stems. So like the strings is an audio file, the brass, the percussion, so on and so forth. So the music editor would they would edit those stems into place and give that to re-recording mixer, and then they would mix that into the picture. But a lot of times, especially if it's songs, if you have just a pop song that's placed in, usually it's just the same stereo mix that you would get on Spotify or Apple or wherever you listen to music. So they need to track down a high quality version of that, not the one that you would have on Spotify, the actual WAV file. And then edit that into place and hand that off. Then the music re-recording mixer, who often these days also does the dialogue, would be the person to actually mix that into the project. Every now and then I get to do some other stuff. Like Tina was a good example where the opening and the ending of the film and then one song in the middle were live Tina Turner performances that they actually dug up from the archives, the multi-track recordings of those concerts. And I got the opportunity to mix those songs for the movie, which is a little unusual. Usually I just do the score. Originally I was, because the Danny and Son are the guys who do Ozark, did the score for Tina. So originally I was just doing their mix. But that just kind of happened that the re-recording mixer, Lawrence, just didn't feel, he was like, I'm not really like a music guy. I don't mix like drums and guitars and stuff. Like, do we have someone else who could mix this down to a set of stems that I can then mix in? And they were like, I don't know. We have this guy mixing the score. Maybe he wants to do it. And I was like, hell yeah, I would love to mix some live Tina Turner. So that was really fun opportunity. And a little different for me. So it was fun that I got to do something a little bit less traditional and kind of, it was especially fun doing a concert because it was kind of going back to my live sound roots, but I was mixing in surround sound for a movie. It was kind of like a good culmination of all my sort of background and things like that.
I had a very selfish reason for asking that because, with you working on Cobra Kai, I know a lot of times they bring in the music of Bill Conti from the Karate Kid movie. So I was like, oh, did you get to mix that?
Well, some of that we did re-record, and some of that I think, I might be wrong about this, but I'm pretty sure Zach and Leo actually integrated in season 3 and I think 2 some of the themes into the score. But I do remember some of the cues we were trying to. I listened to the score for Karate Kid and tried to sort of not make the score sound too modern, because usually I'll clean things up and make it sound kind of modern and hi-fi and punchy and stuff like that. But for some of those throwbacks, I think especially when they went back to Japan, some of those cues, we intentionally tried to make it a little more mid-rangey, a little more tapey, a little more vintagey sounding, because they were integrating either, I can't remember if they actually used Bill Conti themes or if they wrote Bill Conti-esque themes, like stuff that just sounded kind of like the Karate Kid score. But either way, yeah, some of that stuff did come through me. Because if it was recorded with the orchestra, then I would need to mix it before it gets sent off. But yeah, that was fun, trying to figure out the audio character of those pieces of music, and try to match it.
Right, because they used the older footage as well, the video footage, so that makes sense to kind of try to duplicate that with the audios. You did work on Cobra Kai, which is amazing. What can you share with us about working on that show? When did you know you were to come on board?
I think it was probably end of 2017. I need to go back and look to when we actually did the project. It might have been all in 2018, because I know season 1 was released in 18. But Zach and Leo are people that I knew them when I was working at Trevor Morris's studio, that mix studio that I sort of ran and sort of managed, and also then would assist other people. We would rent it out to other composers to mix their projects there. And Chris Beck, who's the composer for Ant-Man and a bunch of other, huge composer, he and his score mixer Casey Stone would rent the room a lot. So they did R.I.P.D. there. I think one other movie that I can't remember. Oh, Muppets Most Wanted. And then the first Ant-Man was mixed at that studio, and I was assisting Casey, the mixer, and that's how I got to know Zach and Leo, because at the time they were working for Chris Beck. So after we all went freelance, kind of around the same time, they moved on from Chris, and I went freelance kind of around the same time. We had done a few projects before together, and we always worked together well, and kind of became friends. And then I can't remember exactly when, but I'm sure they just sent me an email like, hey, we got this new show. It's like a Karate Kid continuation. what's your schedule like? And I'm like, yeah, of course, that'd be fun. I had not, didn't know anything about the project, because that's the thing about me. I don't usually pick my projects per se. I just do whatever my clients are doing, and if I have time for it and it works out, then that's what I end up working on. So Cobra Kai just happened to be something Zach and Leo did, and then they hired me to do some of the mixing. We also had another mixer in the first two seasons, Sean O'Brien, because just the first season or two, like, we had to do everything so fast because the schedule was just crazy for those seasons. But then season 3 and this last season 4 has just been me. But that show, I mean, it's just like I said earlier, it's a super fun show because there's a gazillion different genres in there. Sometimes there's like electronic music, like, four on the floor, dance club kind of stuff. Then obviously there's a lot of really fun, like 80s hair metal style stuff and some 90s music. And then there's all the big Bill Conti style, John Williams style orchestral moments. And then sometimes it's all of those things happening at the same time or after each other. So it's a really fun show to work on because it really allows me to have some fun with, some vintage music production techniques from the 80s and 90s, and then also be mixing stuff that is, the similar way that I'd mix a big movie score. And yeah, so especially, that whole sequence at the end of season 3, didn't really feel like I was doing a TV show at that point. That really, the music was really, really cinematic and felt like a film. So the production quality was really high, which is always a pleasure to work on. And then, like I said, Zach and Leo and I, we're friends now, and we get along really well. And I kind of have a good understanding of the sound of the show and what they're going for. So it's a lot of work, but it's fun. It's fun, rewarding work, and they're good people to work with.
There's a lot of moments that it's like it's an epic scene, so you're gonna jack it up a little bit. Although I understand that a lot of people talk about you never want the music to overwhelm or be like, so blasty that, well, unless you're Christopher Nolan, then you have, then you have the blasting music. But you don't want it to necessarily always be jacked up. But yeah, for some of those particular moments, it has to be epic to match the intensity of the scene.
Yeah, and there are some moments in there where they really push the music, and that was really fun to watch. Because I always watch the show once it comes out. Excuse me, to hear the final, the final mixes that they do at the dub, and then all the final visual effects and all that kind of stuff. So I usually wait. Like, I haven't really watched all of season 4, even though I worked on it. I'm just gonna wait till it's all finished.
Oh my gosh!
I mean,
I'm just like, people will be so jealous to know that. Of course, you've seen it because you work on it, because you get the picture. You get the picture and the music at the same time.
Yes, I mean, but we only work on snippets because there's there's usually not music throughout the entire episode. So
Gotcha.
just seeing little chunks here and there. So yeah, I know, like, globally what's going on, like big moments, because there's usually music to those. But yeah, I haven't really just watched it down end to end.
So have you felt surprised about how people are taking to it? I mean, it's like before it was on the YouTube Red, and then it moved over to Netflix.
Yeah, and it was decently popular on YouTube Red. It had a pretty good following on social media. But then I remember I wasn't really tracking as much, but Zach and Leo have more of the exact numbers. I know as soon as it went to Netflix, like, all of the stars' Instagram accounts, the Cobra Kai Instagram account just skyrocketed. Like, all their social media, it really took off, which is fun. And yeah, I'm not sure if all the Emmys' attention would have been the same if it was still, just because YouTube didn't end up being a really big service. I think that's why they moved on from doing scripted content. And I mean, Netflix is a behemoth, so it's like a great service for it to be on. So yeah, it's exciting. It was fun because they just re-released 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And we finished season 3 the beginning of last year, like just before COVID hit. I think we were already done with season 3, and they didn't release it until almost a year later. I think just to try to spread out the hype for the project, because I think at that time when we were finishing season 3, it was still a YouTube show, and then in that process somewhere in there is when Netflix bought it. But yeah, it was fun that season 1 and 2 came out, got a bunch of hype. A lot of people are excited about it, and then we got to have season 3 released. But then, yeah, we're super excited for season 4 for that to come out. And then the soundtrack will be really good too. There's a lot of really epic, fun music coming in season 4. Takes it to a whole new level.
I saw that you're score mixing for an upcoming film called Blue Bayou. Have you completed that work yet, or are you still in process?
Yeah, that I finished over a year ago. I think that was a while ago, because I don't think they had any distribution yet, because it was an independent film, but it has premiered at, I think it's Sundance or Telluride. Was it Sundance? Or maybe Cannes. I can't remember which film festival it was, but it did very well at the film festivals it's been at. And yeah, I'm not sure if it's released to the public yet, but there's reviews out and things like that because it was at whichever film festival. I can't remember which one it was at. But that's another, that composer is someone I met who was working with another composer on similar projects. Roger Swen's the composer for that. And I've done a few films with him and the director Justin Chon. Because Blue Bayou, I'm trying to think what some of the other films were, but we've done a few of Justin's films in the past, and those were always fun to work on. Very minimal. A lot of, it's a fun example of, we only record like a string quintet. It's not a big giant orchestra, maybe some piano, and some smaller instruments, the guitars and some ukuleles. And then that movie takes place in New Orleans, so we had some jazz trumpet solos happening here and there, and it's a really cool score, and a very prescient topic with undocumented people and what they face in this country and things like that.
So what's coming up next for you?
That
you can talk about.
Yeah, Danny and Sonder have like 5 new shows now. I think that we all have. Some of them we started, some of them are going to be starting. My schedule's like insane for the rest of the year, which I knew that was going to happen. I knew as soon as they started filming again that the whole industry would just start to go crazy, because things kind of died down during COVID. Not that COVID's over yet, but when it really hit, yeah, obviously things were slowed down a lot. But that's coming up. I just finished a film called Solitary with the composer for Promising Young Woman, Anthony Willis. That should be a cool film. I'm not sure when that's coming out. I think not till the end of the year, maybe even early next year. But that one's coming up. Ozark season 4 we're working on right now, though that again I think doesn't come out until sometime next year, though I'm not exactly sure when that's releasing. Yeah, those are the big things that are coming up that I know I can talk about. I think some of them I can. I just can't remember what's secret and what's not.
So where can people find your work if they want to follow your progress as you go along with these different shows?
My website's McGowanSoundworks.com, or if you just Google my name or McGowan Soundworks, you'll find that website. My Instagram is probably where I'm most active. That's Film Mix, but with PH, so PHILM_MIX. I think I'm just Phil_McGowan on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter a ton, every now and then. So those are the main places to find me online. And then my IMDb page as well, which if you Google my name, my IMDb should show up. And I try to keep that pretty updated with things that are coming up when I know I can add them.
Well, thank you so much for your time this evening. I enjoyed talking to you. And I guess we will see you next time on one of my stories. Bye.
Great. Bye. Thank you.